Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com. Today, we're talking about the Cantillon effect and how does affect in Venezuela, and funny how it's working right now on this particular time. So in case you don't know the Cantillon effect, I'm going to explain it further on this video, and also how is affecting right now Venezuela. So let's start. The Cantillon effect is actually was created and say was documented by a famous economist named Richard Cantillon. He's Irish and also a very smart man. And actually, economic science didn't exist back then on the 17th century or so. And he was starting to get to, connecting the dots on the economical situation back then. And back then, he basically observed and rightfully and very accurately reported that always the wealth went to the wealthiest people. Talking about that back then, everything was agriculture, basically, because this was the Cantillon effect started, was documented before the Industrial Revolution. So back then, before that, we already the economy was an agriculture economy. Everything came by the land. I'm talking about the crops of everything, wine, the crops for the cattle and such. Also the crops for fruits, vegetables, food overall, but also for clothing, because the different farmers just were on plantations on any given field, and back then that was the primary resource, the commodity, in order to manufacture some clothing. So basically everything came from the ground, and from those lands the people who always benefit from the economic output was the people who owned the land. And actually Cantillon mentions these people, the people who, let's say, uses their land for the economic output, actually are benefactors to society. And I will agree, not 100% agree, but I will agree with that statement. However, what happens is when the economy of any given territory start to grow because there was a surplus of economic resources, because the economy is thriving back then, well, what happened is that created another incentives in order to purchase another products that also were made by the commodities of the land, and created this whole economical and social turmoil, because the socio-economic structure was all the time shifting between, let's say, the middle class that was pretty much not existent but then, but it was some middle class, and of course the working class people. But at the end, the people who always get richer was the people who owns the land and borrows the land in order to produce all the goods and services that they were back then. And of course, what happens after that is that, well, now you can explain that with the economics, with the factors of production, land, labor, and capital. But the most important is land in this case, and of course, capital. Very good. So on this economic situation shifting, the owners of the land, I'm talking the big owners of the land, at the end the situation might shift, but always they're gonna get richer, and it's gonna grow the inequality between the people who owns the land and the people who doesn't own the land. That doesn't mean that the people who are the working class that don't own the land just work the land. It's not that they are getting poorer, but the spread, the inequality is growing. The working class might get on the good days, get a little bit less poor, but the rich people are gonna get way richer, the people who own the land. Okay, basically the Cantillon effect, talking the old way, it was just that the people who were close to the land get even richer. After that, what happened with the Cantillon effect, it was mentioned mostly on the dynamics on monetary policy. Because back then, I'm talking the sound money, the real money, and gold bucks are gonna love this. It was gold or silver or precious metal, something tangible, not just paper that were worthless. So what happened, of course, that the people who owns the gold and issues the papers, uh, all the time, eventually are gonna be tempted to just print more paper with the same amount of gold. So what happens? The inflation, the currency gets depreciated, and the same story all over again. Meanwhile, when inflation happens, is because the people close to the power, close to the wealth of a nation, any given nation, are the ones who are gonna get true value of this paper printing, and that's where when money printing starts, the people who are far from the power and the wealth and such, the working class, they're gonna get poorer because their paper, their currency is gonna worth less and less over time. Meanwhile, the people who print the money or are close to the wealth are gonna get richer, richer, and richer because they are getting first they get value because when they print money they have purchasing power before it's spread throughout the economy at one hand, and by the other hand is also their assets, their land, their financial assets, their precious metals are going to start increasing in value without doing a damn thing. Now, how the Cantillon effect works in Venezuela. First, who owns the most valuable asset? The government owns the oil that is the most valuable asset here in Venezuela and many of the means of production. We have a lot of private sector here in Venezuela, despite of what you might think about Venezuela. I mean, there are a lot of private enterprises, and actually those prices are their enterprises are growing right now. There are more entrepreneurs, more investors, more businessmen, and also more international interest for foreign investment. Very good. But the main takeaway is most of the power and the assets and the value is held by the governments and people close to the government. So are the ones who are going to get richer regardless. No saying it's the perfect situation. It's far from perfect, but it is what it is. Also, they print the money. However, of course, they cause a hyperinflation printing such money. But back then, just the population, they had enough and just de facto dollarized the economy. And right now, since 2018, basically the USD is the de facto legal tender and the standard, not gold, not Bitcoin, not oil. The USD is the de facto standard for the Venezuelan economy, like it or not. Very good. Well, after that, the government realized that printing money is not going to help them because basically the currency was worthless back then. Right now, it's kind of different. Well, we had hyperinflation, started 2017, 2018, people had it. The government continued to print money to, let's say, 2020, 2021, still printing money, but on a lesser rate, of course. And after late 2021, Venezuela just officially left the hyperinflation. We just have high inflation, but it's not pretty, but it's way less than we had before. And also that the inflation data is worthless here in Venezuela because the standard is the US. Now, the issue is that the Venezuelan government cannot stop printing money, and here's why. First, actually, they are being fiscally responsible, to say the least. Well, I mean, it's an overstatement, but just for the sake of a conversation, let's just say that. So they are spending less that they used to spend on prior years. The fiscal deficit is been narrowing, still on a deficit, but it's lower. But the main issue is that before, the government printed money for the social welfare programs, but also paying the payroll, the national payroll that is big, around 5 million people, and also for the people who are pensioners, retirees. So you can add another 5 million people. So Venezuelan government had to serve payments to almost 10 million people without counting the social welfare program. What happens is that according to Venezuelan laws, they cannot fire those people, and of course the retirees, you cannot fire retirees. So they don't have the solvency in order to honor such payments, so they just print the money and leave it denominated on Venezuelan bolivars, and that's why truly legalized dollarization is not going to happen anytime soon here in Venezuela. So they still need to print money in order to serve those payments that are worthless because the net present value of such commitments are not doing great. So so the net present value is worthless, although they still have to serve such payments, and they're not. But that's why they're printing the money just enough to serve the minimum of such payments. But at the same time, they reduced sharply the money printing, and that's why the inflation took a hit. The inflation rate took a serious hit on nominal terms. And now, actually, there's a scarcity on bolivars because the government created scarcity for them, but also they require tax payments, government fee payments, and also there is a small tax on transactions on foreign currency. So many things that give artificial value to the Venezuelan bolivar, but at the end of the day, it's worthless, but at the same time, it's very used on everyday Venezuelan life. So still exists. So that's why when you come to Venezuela, you're not gonna see the big blocks of paper currency like in Zimbabwe or Weimar Germany. So I want to close saying this. The Venezuelan government has reduced significantly the money printing. However, they cannot hold completely the money printing of bolivars because they have to serve such payments with government employees and also with pensioners and retirees. So pretty much that's how the Cantillon effect works in Venezuela. Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.